Hey everyone, welcome to the Healthy Brain Podcast. Today's topic is all about positive emotions and the brain benefits of positive emotions. Well, I really want to dive into and give you some ideas on and the research behind this of how positive emotions can change the brain. So I'm crossing my fingers that my power in the house in my office will stay on because yesterday we did lose power, which was not convenient at all. It never is, but it was like a 90-degree day. Thankfully, it was more at the end of the work day. I did lose connection, couldn't work for a couple hours. Of course, I just took it easy. Thankfully, I am so grateful that our local Detroit Edison DTE, they were able to get the power back on within around 3 to 4 hours, which was really good because it was a large area that was for some, they said equipment malfunction, something. But so grateful. You know, it's like you don't realize how much you need the power and electricity until we don't have it. But here we are. So gratitude is a positive emotion. And, you know, I used to, for years, I would know the general, like the negative emotion of being sad or mad. And I've mentioned this before in this podcast that I actually Googled quite a few years ago when I was getting into coaching negative emotions, like the variety. There's actually a feelings wheel which has the array of negative emotions and positive emotions. And I highly encourage you to take a look at it because sometimes when you're identifying and want to identify a emotion, it may not come to you right away, but when you read it, you see it on paper, it may really resonate with you. So let's dive into, in this episode, what happens in the brain when we experience positive emotions. And possibly when you learn what happens in the brain, you will want to make it a priority to feel more positive emotions. Now, of course, most of us would want to feel more positive emotions. But we live lives where negative emotions are normal. And this is a really important point to acknowledge, that it is normal to have both negative and positive emotions. I'm not saying at all that you shouldn't have the negative emotions. The issue is that we often, and I know this was myself for years, we didn't acknowledge the negative emotions. We ignore them. We don't process them. It's like we just sort of push them down. That's when it can affect your health. It can affect everything in your life. And one of the big reasons of why I became a health and life coach is I learned an amazing tool that I use now in my coaching program that, and all of my clients find really transformative in how they approach and manage their lives. It's a coaching tool that helps you to become aware of your emotion, which emotion it is, processing the emotion and shifting it to, well, how do I really want to feel and think in this circumstance of my life? Because the cool thing is, emotions are like fuel to our actions. And if you look at it that way, that a negative emotion will fuel an action that we may not want to take, but it's how we're thinking about something, how we're feeling about it, that's why we take the action or don't take the action. It can actually work as well where it's the inaction. Same thing with a positive emotion. A positive emotion will give you fuel and almost this energy to take the action that you need to take in order to have a certain result. So we'll dive into positive emotions in the brain. And there is a really cool area of study. It's called positive psychology. It's fascinating. and it sheds light on the neuroscience of the brain and emotion. So take a look, like just do a little Google search on positive emotions and the positive psychology, because their approach is really, really interesting. And there's been more research coming out now that it's becoming more popular as far as a field of study and a field of approach in neuroscience and psychology. I mentioned some negative emotions, and there's so many, but it's like being sad, mad, scared, embarrassed, angry, guilty, miserable. And again, it's not the problem of experience a negative emotion. It's when we prolong the negative emotion, and that's where we sit in this negative emotion, and it actually impairs many areas of our lives. There's research to show that our cognitive abilities decrease when we have prolonged negative emotion. We also feel more stressed. Our memory and attention are affected. We lose motivation. We feel overwhelmed. Our thinking actually slows down with negative emotions. And in some cases, you can't think outside the box. I actually call it decreased mental flexibility. It's when people cannot think outside the box, they cannot think creatively. So we know that negative emotions has this effect on our brains. On the flip side, let's look at the positive emotions, and we'll dive into that. So positive emotions being joy, love, hope, being thankful, being confident, appreciation, gratitude, like I began the episode with gratitude. These positive emotions have been shown to create brain benefits, such as an improvement in cognitive thinking. So cognition is the way our brain processes, uses information, communicates, understands, remembers, problem solves. So cognition is a very important, it's an umbrella skill. There's a lot of mini skills underneath cognition. Positive emotion has been shown to improve our mental flexibility, our attention levels, our memory improves, our problem solving abilities improve, our creativity improves, and also there are many social interaction or socialization benefits. So interacting with other people, that seems to have an improvement when we're experiencing the positive emotions. So how does this happen? How can an emotion cause these brain benefits? So there's three main ways. There are also other little ways underneath these three main ones, but I just wanted to give you and dive into these three main ways that emotions create. Like, how does it happen that feeling joy, feeling gratitude, feeling hope, and the positive emotions, how does it affect our brain and how does it happen? So three main ways that it does this is it affects the release of neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are messengers to the cells. For example, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, those are all neurotransmitters, and they all, I mean, I could do another episode on all the effects of them. I'm sure you've heard of them. But the reason is that when our brain is thinking a certain way and our body is responding with and thinking of this emotion, this hope, this peace, love, gratitude, forgiveness, that releases neurotransmitters in the body, and that affects and it messages to the cells. So that's one way that the brain benefits from positive emotions. Another pathway is neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change when it's exposed to different stimuli. So when positive emotions are present, they stimulate the brain and strengthen neural pathways. So it's easier to access this positive emotional state, such as optimism, happiness, hope, peace, love, contentment. Also, with this neuroplasticity, with these stimulating the brain, our emotional regulation is enhanced. There's an improved communication between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. So with neuroplasticity, when our body and our brain starts to feel these emotions, then what happens in the brain is that there's new pathways, new roadways. And if you keep thinking in this positive emotion and feeling this positive emotion, then it's like making additional grooves, this neural pathway. Then it's easier to have the emotional regulation, to improve the communication between the areas of the brain. It's easier to access this positive emotional state. So that is another way, is the brain benefits from positive emotions because it results in changes in the brain like neuroplasticity. Now, the third area is with positive emotions, there's more activity in certain parts of the brain and less activity in certain parts of the brain. For example, when positive emotions are present, the prefrontal cortex, the ventral striatum are activated with these positive emotions. And this promotes the cognitive flexibility that I was talking about. Because really the prefrontal cortex, that's really the area of our brain in the front of the brain where it's in charge of the working memory, an aspect of memory, of attention, of planning, organizing, task initiation, task completion, emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility. So when the positive emotions are present, this prefrontal cortex is more active, and that means more improved cognitive abilities. Another example is that in the area of the brain, such as the amygdala, when positive emotions are present, there's less activity in the amygdala, or it's more dampened in most, because the amygdala seems to be more responsive to fear, concern, stress. It's highly active. Now, the amygdala is also active though with humor. So that's why it's not completely turned off with positive emotion, but what it does is it improves the communication to the prefrontal cortex. So that is what happens, and there's an increased activation of the parasympathetic nervous system when the amygdala is dampened, when it's a lessened activity. And it improves our management of stress. So we know that there's brain benefits of feeling positive emotions, and how we gain these benefits is the neurotransmitters, certain neurotransmitters are released, certain things happen for neuroplasticity, and certain areas of the brain are more highly activated and less activated. So you can definitely go down the rabbit hole and find out more about these positive emotions and the effect on the brain. But really the takeaway is you're not just feeling the feeling, it's actually changing your brain. The flip side also is negative emotions. You're also changing the brain when you are living in the negative emotion. And we know chronic stress can affect our health. It can affect, so feeling and being in negative emotions can be paralyzing. It can affect our lives in so many ways, just as positive emotions can. So it's important that we learn how to identify and become aware of when we're feeling more negative emotions and we're feeling stuck. That's why I created my coaching program, Build a Stronger Brain. You can still join in. We're actually in week 1 of the 8-week or 60-day program. So you'll find the link in the show notes. And this is where this week, I introduced the mindset and planning tools for success. This is where I talked about the tool that I mentioned that helps people to choose the positive, choose the emotion, to change how they think, how they feel, how they act, and the results. It's all based on cognitive behavioral therapy, on neuroscience. We can take control. You can take control of how you're feeling. Also, you can start feeling and start being okay with feeling your emotions. I do want to say that for some people, when they feel really stuck, they do need more professional help in therapy, in managing and processing the emotions. So just be aware of that. If you have a lot of tenderness coming up in this topic of becoming more aware of your emotions and you need professional assistance, then please check with your doctor to get a therapist in a recommendation for it. The coaching is a tool when people are ready to make the change. Sometimes people need more processing, more time to assist. And of course, you can always reach out to me and I can give some recommendations if you are interested and if you have questions about the program. I'd love to answer them for you. Thank you again for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.